WandaVision, Schotten Totten 2, and Frog Detective 2, The Case of the Invisible Wizard. This is Staying In. So, Sam, I just want to take this opportunity to apologise for breaking our pact that we put in motion not that long ago.
What pact was this?
Sam and I did that thing that men in their 30s do, where they recommend each other internet providers and get vouchers for doing so.
Oh, yes.
So I got 25 quid in Amazon vouchers because Sam recommended the Vodafone, and you also got £5. Mm-hmm. And we put our heads together and we thought, well, there's a game we really want to play, but we can't justify playing it. But however, there is a smaller version of that game that gives us a taste of the game that we want to play. So let's invest in that.
And some say that taste is all you need.
Jaws of the Lion, which is a slightly lighter version of Gloomhaven. So we both said to ourselves, look, when it comes back on Amazon, that'll be what the 50 quid is for, Kris. We'll go into it.
Save it. And it's been sitting, the email has been sitting there, and take it as a guy who currently I'm helping out. I like to feel like I'm helping out Oxford University track and study coronavirus. So all the money I get from that lovely work that I do is currently in the stores for when I finally decide to buy, well, not when I finally decide, when there is a PS5 for me to buy in Amazon. Okay, so I've currently got this little pocket squirreled away of Amazon, and thanks to a little bonus from work, there's nearly £300 in there. So I'm I'm ready. I'm nearly there, lads. Nearly a free PS5. But I'd specially kept this 25 quid from Vodafone squirreled away, so it wouldn't even congregate with this money for my PS5. For that matter, I put Kris in charge. Kris was in charge of purchase, acquisition, and management thereof.
Job done. You're in safe hands.
Yes, exactly. So then, cut to this afternoon, and I'm in the middle of organising my birthday wish list on Amazon. And sorry, when I say it out loud, it sounds really stupid. So I was in the middle of sorting that out, and I thought, and I'm creating a bespoke one this year, which is a departure for me. And I thought, I'll go through my other wish list and see what's on offer. Have a look. Board game wish list. Oh, Jaws of the Lion is available. Quickly. Kris. Flashing lights. Semaphore. Morse code.
Yep.
Get on this.
Yep. I said, Sam sent me the picture. I said, go for it, Sam. Yes, go for it. Yes, definitely. And then Sam replied, can you give me your voucher code? And I went, sorry, buddy. I've just bought a jigsaw of the moon. And then I had to send him a little bank transfer. Yes, the reason why and listeners at home, I actually ran recording this on my armchair because my kitchen table for the last 36 hours is basically been taken over by what I thought was going to be quite a small, ample-sized jigsaw. Yeah. It's massive.
Yeah. How many pieces?
Well, 1,000. But I don't know if any of you looked out the window recently at night, but the moon, turns out, has not got much differentiation when it comes to colour. So it is really difficult.
Surely the edges is easy, though.
I know, but once you've done that, once you've got over that buzz, it's quite tricky after that. Although it is really addictive. I mean, I think it's becoming more addictive than anything else, game-wise. I haven't played Ghost of Tsushima for days. It's just this jigsaw. I don't know whether it's just time away from a screen or whether it's just the kind of novelty of, I can't remember the last time I did a jigsaw, but it's just been really, really, really nice.
It's
really
relaxing.
Zen. Oh my gosh, incredibly relaxing.
Would you say it was peaceful?
Definitely.
Do you think you've been floating in a sea of tranquility?
Took you quite a few kind of questions to get to that point there, Pete.
Yeah.
That wasn't an easy route,
slow
was
burn,
it?
Yeah, but Dan, think about how many attempts it took to get to the moon.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
It's been a good 3 or 4 years since I last did a jigsaw, and I did it whilst we were away with the family for Christmas one year, and it was one of those impossy jigsaws, but it wasn't 1,000 piece. I think it was only 200-300, and it was all candy canes in a bundle, one picture. So it's really tough to do, but it was really they are incredibly satisfying. I think the only thing I have against jigsaws, if anything, is that once they're over with, I'm kind of
oh yeah, totally.
I think they kind of they really peak, you get your excitement, they sustain your attention for a long time, but then the sort of the payoff at the end is kind of like, all right.
It's actually too big for my table, so that's going to be fun when I get to that point. That's going to be a difficult conversation to have with myself.
Oh, are you going to get one of those roll-up mats?
My nan's got one of those.
Just do it as like a crescent moon. Just don't do like a third of it.
What, and just plane down the sides? Yeah. Just a little Stanley knife, just go around.
I've always been tempted by one of those 3D jigsaws.
Why a 3D one?
Well, why a 2D jigsaw?
Because a 2D one's got a nice sense of nostalgia to it. There's a sort of connection with a youth and a sort of tradition in which, you know, the jigsaw is a part of. As soon as you move it into the third dimension, it's like, who are you trying to kid? You're not video games.
I love the fact that this is like the board game equivalent of kids these days don't know they're bored. Just like
when I was a child, we had 2D jigsaws and we liked it.
We just had scraps of paper that we had to put together.
and that was enough. You know, we'd sit down and like, my wife today was talking about, when our parents when they're growing up and they just wanted to take a picture of their newborn, it must have been so difficult, you know, setting up the shot, getting it printed out, putting it in the post and sending it off to someone. Are we really saying 3D jigsaws are like the iPhone equivalent to...
Of course they are. Yeah, of course they are.
I found out the other day that I've been playing a game wrong for several years, and like only just realised it in the last couple of days. And it's been a revelation to me because I went on a 9-game winning streak.
Oh no! Which game?
Lost Cities.
Okay.
Lost Cities.
Oh really? What did you got wrong?
Basically, I found a. So I was like, as with all things, like me and my wife always really enjoyed Lost Cities, and but the scoring at the end, I always found it's a little bit finicky, that the scoring. So I had a look around at some apps, and I found this wonderful app called Lost City Helper. And little did I know how much it would actually help and improve my game. And just to give you an idea of like how much I was getting the scores wrong before this scoring was adjusted, the current high score we had was 211. That changed to when we readjusted the scoring, and now the top score is 77.
Right.
Wow.
So yeah, after using this app, I realised that we've been scoring the game differently for so many years, but it's actually been incredible because it's changed the game to such a degree that it's actually like, you know, when you're playing a game and you kind of sit there and go, I'm enjoying this, but it doesn't feel right. It doesn't like people talk about this game like being a really interesting like competition and really thinky, and like I'm enjoying Lost Cities, but it feels like it's more about luck than it is about actual strategy and where you place in the. Turns out that's because I completely read the scoring rules wrong, and so that's been like the massive change, is that the game has become a lot more about gambling, risk and reward, actual strategy when you play things, counting cards. It's been a revelation, Kris.
Oh my word.
Yeah.
Gosh. Makes you wonder if there are games that I know there are games out there that I've been playing wrong. Definitely. Most recently, Takenoko. Root. I still don't think I've got the rules of Root down.
No.
At all.
It's funny though, isn't it? Like I'll often play like a digital adaptation, and that'll be the thing that makes me go, oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, why can't I? It's like, well, because that's not in the rules, dummy. Like Splendor, I did that for a bit. Like, you know, I think I've got there now, but there's always been something. There's always been little tweaks, little rules, little things that give you extra elements of strategy, like how you reserve and use gold pieces in Splendor. And I'd never quite understood specifically how that worked. I was always like, it just feels like you're going to fall behind. And actually, it's a really good mechanic to kind of open things up a bit more.
But it's really interesting, isn't it, that how much like when you play a well-designed game, how much like a bad rules reading does give you that feeling of something's not right here. Like that doesn't feel like it should be this case. And I always find that really interesting. Like, you know, when you're playing a game, it's like, let me just have a look at, like, something just doesn't feel like, something never felt right with Lost Cities, but now it's really clicked. And especially with this new version that we got, it's got like a 6th expedition as well, which like extends the game out, which we were brave enough to pull out the other day because we've just about managed to start finding a bit more time to play games together. It was always my intention that, like, when Hugo came along, I knew that, like, he would eat into our time playing games, but I was always very kind of persistent in trying to at least keep it there in some way and, like, develop the habit of finding time to play games. So, like, I was very keen of, like, managing expectations in a way of, like, especially in the early, like, few months of putting games down that I know that we could either step away and leave and then come back to, or be pretty happy to, like, oh, we've done this for 10 minutes, Hugo's up and crying, let's go and deal with him, we'll come back to this later, or forget that, we'll play a game another time. And, like, I think that's really helped in, like, developing a nice rhythm now where we're like really finding the time to play now and getting a lot of stuff to the table. And also it's meant that we tend to, like, incorporate Hugo in play now as well. Like, buying some playing card stands is the best investment I've made in, like, the last 6 or 7 months. So now, like, when we're playing Lost Cities or Mandala or something like that, we can just have the cards all in little stands in front of us, so we've got both hands free to, like, hold Hugo, which is great because then we can, like, involve him in what we're doing. Parenting tip, right? The exit games from Cosmos are the perfect games to play with a little child because you can give them the stuff you want to ruin and destroy. We were playing Exit with Hugo over New Year's, and, like, we would just get any card we knew we didn't need anymore, we just gave it to him, and he was just, like, putting it in his mouth, ripping it up, chewing. It was great. So we do have to be a little bit careful with what he can grab at a distance. But yeah, so we've been playing a ton of Lost Cities, and we've been playing Schotten Totten 2. The sequel to sequel or sister game, as the designer Reiner Knizia likes to call it, to the game that is in my top 5 of all time, Schotten Totten, which is, like, it's a strange game. It's been around for, like, 20 years in some shape or form. Like, he originally put it in, like, a magazine, the rules, and you could just play it with a pack of cards, and then it was, like, picked up by publishers, and, like, you may know it as Battle Line, which GMT published, and then someone made Battle Line Medieval, which is like a homebrew version of Battle Line but with better art. And then Yellow came out with Schotten Totten, which is, like, the game is set in Scotland. And then recently, this most recent version, Schotten Totten 2, which I think is the first, like, game that I played which is like a direct sequel to a board game. I can't think of any others.
What about Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert?
Oh, yeah. And I guess Burgle Brothers 2.
Next month, fingers crossed.
Next month, fingers crossed. But Schotten Totten 2 is really, it's a really, like, I thought it was just going to be almost like, because it comes in the same size box as Schotten Totten. And I really thought it was just going to be the same game, but with a few extra cards or some sort of expansion-esque kind of scenarios or something like that. But it's Reiner Knizia, who's the designer who also designed Lost Cities. It feels like he's looked at the game and kind of wanted to kind of move the design forward and think about how it really plays and what other sort of challenges that the original game brought. And basically what he's done is turned what was quite sort of like a head-to-head battler, which was Schotten Totten, into this asymmetrical game, which feels a lot more thematic to what I feel like the original was trying to aim for. Because Schotten Totten is a game where essentially it's trying to recreate a battle. which is why GMT called it Battle Line. And you have these like 9 different points on the table, and the idea is you're playing cards of a certain suit and a certain number, and whoever gets the better formation on either side of all of these battle points will then win that point. And the formations are all based around poker hands. So a flush beats a straight or whatever, or like, you know, a pair, 2 pair beats a pair of cards, all that kind of stuff. And that's how the game basically worked. And it was just a straight head-to-head, the same rules for both the players. However, with the second game, it's been sort of flipped on its head, and there's one player who's the attacker and one player who's defined as the defender. And it's been taken out of a field, and actually, instead of these random stones played across a table, the tokens that you're essentially battling over make this like tableau of a castle, or like a castle walls, and the defender sits behind those castle walls, and then the attacker is like facing towards them, and you're playing your formations directly against parts of the castle. So it feels like a lot of a more thematic game. It feels like he's really looked at it and gone, how can I make this feel more like a battle, feel more like a 2-player confrontation? And the other thing which I think is a lot more refined from the original is that what held the original back, and what I feel like didn't strike with many people who I've introduced it to, is that everything was kind of like based on how well do you know poker hands, how well can you count cards, how well can you look at what's on the table and go, right, if the 6 of yellow is there, I know I can put this card here, and my opponent can't beat me in this formation. And I always felt like that was a major setback to the whole design of the game, because I enjoy that sort of deductive reasoning, counting cards, bluffing, and playing and those poker hands, but not everyone does. And even though I really always enjoyed Schotten Totten, it was always really difficult to find someone on my same wavelength in terms of mechanics to enjoy.
So how does the sequel like move away from that need to know knowledge of like poker and counting cards and stuff?
So the kind of like the knowledge of poker and counting cards kind of, it remains like that's a way to win a part of the battle, is to have a formation on one side of the wall which is stronger than your opponent's. However, in the previous Schotten Totten, every single point that you'd be putting down cards for, it was always the same. You'd be putting 4 cards down, and then that would be totaled up against your opponents. However, here, every point on the wall has a different limit to the amount of cards that can be put down. So one point you'll have 4, another you'll have 3, another you'll have 2. So it means that if you're trying to get your head around what cards beat what, you can just focus on where you just put 2 cards down, and you can put your strongest 2, like do a straight run at 7-8 of the same colour, and you know that's going to be the strongest. And then there's parts of the wall where it's 4 cards, and for this part of the wall, you just got to get the highest number of cards if you were to add them all together. At this part of the wall, you've got to get the lowest number of cards if you were to add all their values together. And I think that just gives it a sense of focus and a sense of, like, if you're struggling getting your head around the fact that you're counting cards, there's specific areas along this wall where you can kind of shift your focus and shift your energies as the attacker or the defender. Right. And then what happens is once you've won a formation, you'll then flip the token over, and on the other side will be a different requirement for you to put your cards down. So what will be just place 3 cards here will then turn into place the highest value cards that are all the same colour here. Or you have to do a run of cards here. So I feel like for someone who's not very familiar with like what poker hand beats another poker hand, when you see something on the table that goes, right, I've got to get the highest value of cards that are all the same colour on this point, it gives that player a lot more of a focus and something to actually like attain towards, rather than trying to guess what the other player is going to be doing in that situation. And for me, that's made it a lot more of an enjoyable experience. And there are other asymmetrical things where, like, the defender has these like little hot oil cauldrons that they can essentially pour over the cards that are on their wall, and it like gets rid of one of the cards that's closest to their wall, affecting like the total summation of that formation. So yeah, so it's really good, and I feel like it's a different enough approach to the game that if you like Schotten Totten or Battle Line, then it could be actually a better introduction to that mechanic than actually just getting Schotten Totten off the start.
If you didn't have the original, would you go straight to the sequel?
Yes.
Really?
I would.
And would you own both? Is it worth owning both? Or is it an either-or thing?
I don't know. I feel like you could go from Schotten Totten 2 to the original, because Schotten Totten 2 feels more like an introduction to the mechanics, and then the original is more of a raw application of those things. But I feel like those interesting points and the way that the battle is actually formatted out, like I think I actually prefer Schotten Totten 2. I feel like it's just a more interesting puzzle, and I'm not always worrying about if, and this is going to sound a bit big-headed, I'm not always worrying about if my opponent is as engaged or as up with the mechanics as I am, which is what I kind of always worry about with Schotten Totten. Like, I feel like they're not going to enjoy this because they're not as geeky or as into like the maths puzzle as I am.
Well, it's like when you play like an abstract game like chess, right? If you're just introducing somebody to chess, probably the best way of doing it is to not absolutely destroy them on their first turn. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's the same with games where there is an element of, I don't know, like metagaming, like a really hardcore element of mastery, like a chess, like poker. I think poker has a very high skill threshold actually as well.
Yeah,
for true mastery of the game. Like, it's easy to understand the rules of chess, it's easy to understand the rules of poker, but if to actually get to that next level of like, oh, okay, I'm actually pretty good at this stuff. And it sounds like that's the same with Schotten Totten.
It was so much more easier to introduce it to my wife than it was the original Schotten Totten. Introduce and teach, because it meant that the teach was just like, right, for this you just got to focus in on this. When it looks like this is all you got to focus in on. So it meant there was no periods where, I'll sum it up this way. When I played Schotten Totten, I think both with my wife and you, Kris, you both uttered the phrases, I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'm just going to put this card here. Whereas I feel like, and what happened when I played Schotten Totten 2, my wife actually never had that instance of not knowing what she was doing on her turn, which I think is like, that's the critical thing, especially for a first play. Like, the engagement is right there from the start, and yeah, it's super good. It's good. I enjoyed it.
Do you remember when we used to go to parties?
No, actually. I have to say, Pete, no, I don't.
A jigsaw is a good thing to have at a party, though, isn't it?
If you want to send off the universal sign of, I don't want to talk to anyone.
But you can have it set up in a room.
Yeah.
When the network, the national radio station that I work with, had this thing once where they thought that it would prove popular with the listeners if we had someone sitting in a room on their own all day making a jigsaw. And the whole entire staff were encouraged to go in at any point and build a bit of the jigsaw for themselves. And to be honest, I saw the man in there for several hours, and then it just kind of like ended up disappearing away to a cupboard somewhere. But I thought, but surely something like that at a party might be quite a popular thing. Like, if you just wanted to like have a little of a breakaway, here's a little task you can complete.
Yeah. You know, I can imagine the scene now. You've got the room, and there's the jigsaw puzzle, and there's one person by themselves doing the jigsaw puzzle, and a couple come in. They've maybe had a drink or two, and they open up the door. Oh, hey, Jeff, how's it going? What are you up to? Jeff turns round. Oh, I'm doing a puzzle by myself. And then the other two people say, oh, yeah, and just slowly close the door and back away.
And also the fact is that, you know, you can't have any kind of nice atmospheric lighting in the room. You need it fully lit so you can see all the pieces. So it's going to be fully lit.
Yeah.
Music will be down.
I actually did go to a party once and found myself doing a 3D jigsaw. Actually, come to mention it, it was only it was like a small like pyramid, like very very small. You hold it in your hand, kind of jigsaw of all these blocks and stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a stag do. It was the first night. I think the amount of alcohol I drank may have led me towards spending a bit more time on this than I usually would have. But I just spent a good portion of the evening, like every now and again, it'd be in the kitchen. I'd go back and pick it up, like, why can't I work this out? And I'd just jam some pieces together. It didn't work, and I'd walk away again. And I'd keep coming back to it all night long, and I never did it.
It was supposed to be the Statue of Liberty, but Dan turned it into a pyramid.
Yeah. I just got glue and I did what I did with your crescent moon and just sawed it all off.
When I was planning Sam's stag do, that wasn't actually like, the break glass in case of emergency thing I had as a backup in case everything went down.
Pull out the 3D jigsaw, lads.
Well, if we'd known that, Kris, if you'd known that, you could have saved yourself a lot of effort. Just got
unless I got people to assemble like the jigsaw version of a stripper or something.
Which would be horrible in many, many, many ways.
Oh, particularly if you're making it, Dan.
Can you imagine? Like somebody's like, hey, what? Look out for this, lads! Puts down the boombox, presses play. It's just like this super sexy, like, bow, 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 and then like somebody grabs a jigsaw and opens it up on the table, like, now we're cooking with gas.
So I caught WandaVision last week on Disney Plus.
What were they up to?
Well, it's been a while since we've encountered the two of them because this has probably been the longest the world has been without any Marvel property, live-action property, really, I suppose, for some time. I think Spider-Man Far From Home was the last one, I think. Or was it Ant-Man and the Wasp?
No, Far From Home was the last.
Far From Home. Yeah, so it's been quite a while. And so I didn't realise how much I had missed Marvel Studios
until you saw the until you saw like the sizzle reel at the start, the logo.
Oh gosh, yeah. That was great. I think and straight away you get that feeling of being in the cinema, which is something I've also not experienced for quite some time, like many people. And also, this is a great series in the sense that you don't have to be, for those out there who are thinking, well, why do I want to watch a series? I didn't watch all of the Marvel films. I can't really plug into a series right now. Kevin Feige, who's the kind of the Marvel guru and Marvel Studios guru and figurehead, has said that this series doesn't necessarily require you to have watched any Marvel before, but if you have done, there are lots of kind of hidden treats and Easter eggs. No, he genuinely says that.
I disagree with that.
I mean, I think you can watch it. You can watch anything without having seen it before. It's just whether you'd really get the benefit of it, because there are kind of layers of storytelling here that are quite interesting. And I think not having a lack of a pre-existing knowledge, it removes, say, some of the pathos of it. It doesn't feel there is much stakes attached to the narrative.
So, WandaVision.
Yes.
So, I know who the Vision is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a computer and now he's not.
Well, he still is, but...
Well, he's basically a computer, isn't he?
Yeah, like an android, basically, with a heart, yeah. And Wanda, the other part of that is the prefix to that is Wanda Maximoff, who is the Scarlet Witch.
The Scarlet Witch.
Have you read House of M?
Oh, it's so good, yes.
No, I've never read that.
All right, okay.
As Sam alluded to, House of M is the story in which you realise that Wanda Maximoff is the most powerful figure in the Marvel Universe, pretty much. And yeah, so WandaVision is set after the events of Avengers Endgame, which we talked about in a previous pod, where you've got these two superpowered individuals. One who is part android that can phase through things and has a laser that comes out of his head.
Can he still do that? Is the stone still there, though?
I can't remember, actually. The other one who can control reality. And you put them together and it sounds like a hilarious sitcom, which is essentially what WandaVision is. It's these two trying to settle down in the suburbs, this fictional place called Westview, and trying to blend in and not let people know that they're kind of superpowered, and they're trying to live this domesticated life. So Vision, he looks very androidy, and then when he leaves home, he kind of does his face, and he looks like your mild-mannered, middle-class kind of American going off to work in the office. And it really does, I say it's like a sitcom, it really does lean into the sitcom aesthetic. And that for me is the allure, the charm of this whole setup really, because there's only been 2 episodes dropped as of recording, but each episode is a homage to a particular era of sitcoms. So the first one is 50s sitcoms, so like the Dick Van Dyke Show. And I was doing some research on this. They actually consulted Dick Van Dyke.
Of course they did.
Because it's Marvel, isn't it? It's incredible. And it's great, Pete, because you've got the square aspect ratio. It's the black and white. They actually filmed it in front of a live studio audience like they would have done with a sitcom. So you've got this canned laughter.
And practical effects as well. So there's like stuff where Wanda's making like, it's like the storyline is so 50s sitcom. It's like the boss comes round for dinner,
right?
And like the Vision's promotion all hinges on the success of this dinner. So you can immediately like spool on from there about what happens. Wanda's like making a dinner in the kitchen, and the boss's wife accidentally like goes to open the window, and Vision just managed like the serving hatch. And Vision just managed to distract her, and like you can see all the food like floating around, but it's so obviously like all on strings, like it's almost like Fantasia,
like fishing wire,
of fishing wire, like this Fantasia moment of that spoon like stirring the bowl on its own, like the plates all floating around. It's like it's so obvious that it's either very very like heavy-handed computer effects, or knowing Marvel, I probably believe they did actually do it practically. Like, the practical effects stuff is really like spot on. I really enjoyed that about it.
But Sam's absolutely right. It has those kind of like narrative tropes of those traditional sitcoms. Like the second one is that they're trying to impress a local town at the talent show by doing a magic act.
Oh,
Vision gets the equivalent of drunk in his sense, and what happens is he ends up using his powers to do the magic show, but Wanda's trying to make them look like they're practical effects. So she uses her powers to make everything look like it was done with like mirrors and stuff like that. And you actually it's so funny. It's
my favorite gag from that one is so what is it? Vision lifts up the piano.
Yeah.
There's a piano on stage, and Vision lifts it up, and then Wanda's just like, oh my god, they're going to figure out who we are. So she walks over and she turns the piano into like a 2D cardboard cutout and starts walking away with it. So it's like the whole conceit is just like, it's like this reverse like magic act. And as she's walking away with this like cardboard cutout of piano, someone in the crowd just says, "That was my grandma's piano." Like it's got genuine like comedic chops, like Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, like are really sending it up, and like living like, you know, chewing the scenery and having an absolute blast, like playing in this like sitcom archaic sort of realm.
So it's got all of that stuff, and that sounds interesting in and of itself. But why is it Marvel? Like, where does it?
Basically, Pete's like, where's the I Dream of Jeannie remake things?
To be fair, the thing that you mentioned that, Sam, when I really enjoyed it, and I was taken away from it. It was reminding me, like, when I was really young, you would have the likes of Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie on Channel 4 at 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that on a weekend, and I would watch that, and it took me back to those, because obviously those were before my time when they were first broadcast, but absolutely took me back to those, and they put so much kind of effort into, as you say, speaking with kind of people who made the original kind of shows, so much effort into nailing the beats, the comedy, the look of it, every aspect of it just feels so lovely. And so obviously this is part of an overarching narrative, which over the course of, I think is it 10 episodes or is it 8 episodes? I'm not quite sure.
I don't know. It's 6 to 8. I think it's either 6 or 8 episodes. I think that's what they originally planned. Like, it's got like the budget of like, a typical production. And this is Marvel Studios. It's not Marvel Television that did all the other stuff like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter and things like that. So it's got heft behind it.
Overarching narrative over that, where you have this kind of front of this TV show, but you are given hints, and as I say, at the point of recording, we've only seen 2 episodes, and they are hinting that there is something behind this. Obviously, you kind of watch it, and you know Wanda and Vision don't live inside a 50s sitcom. You know that, so this is obviously not real life. So there is something going on, and there are elusive. There's a. I mean, I don't really want to get into spoilers, but if you haven't maybe seen it yet, maybe just skip the next 30 seconds while I say this. There's a moment in that first episode where there's a turn, and not just a turn in terms of kind of what's been said and stuff like that, but the camera suddenly has slightly different angles, and it's all a bit strange, and it's a bit close up, and suddenly the intonation of the dialogue changes and doesn't fit, and everything about it jars with everything else in the episode, and then it clicks and it's back out of it again, and it's that moment, that kind of thing that makes you sit and go, okay, that I'm in, that's something, and that's all I needed.
Yeah,
because it's really brave that those first 2 episodes, I think especially the first one, they felt no need to step away from the parody of the 50s sitcom or the 60s sitcom. They don't kind of really step away from that. They say, you know what, we're going to give you a 30-minute sitcom, and we're going to play it out from start to finish as that. And I think that's really, really brave as a first episode, where you've got that hook in that, yes, most people who are watching it will have a pre-existing investment, so they're going to stick with it. And chances are they know roughly what's going on. So when they see these characters, they know it's not real. So it's not going to be like, I know I have seen some people kind of online who haven't taken to it and have wanted it to kind of get moving. Personally, I loved it. I love the fact that they really, really kind of played into that. And when you talk about kind of Kevin Feige saying that you don't need to watch it, I mean, technically, no. I think you'd lose quite a bit by not having a pre-existing knowledge, especially of that relationship, and especially what happened at the end of that relationship. By not knowing that, I mean, obviously, we kind of spoilers. This is going back to probably Infinity War now, because in Infinity War is where spoilers, Vision is killed, and in Endgame we only get a very brief scene where we see Wanda being able to deal with that because she's not around for the rest of the film, and so we haven't really seen her dealing with the death of her love. And obviously, you don't know how this can play out. To me, in my mind, that's something that's got to happen in this series. We're going to see that, so there is that kind of element of awaiting that really kind of powerful moment, and just seeing it on the horizon, and you know it's coming. And the way that they will bring it round, and they're doing all this interesting stuff, they're just really knocking it out of the park. And I think this is the first Marvel TV series of their kind of new batch. So you have this coming, you have this out now, you have Falcon and the Winter Soldier coming, you have Loki, you have Miss Marvel, you have Moon Knight, you have loads of stuff coming. If any of the stuff coming has the level of thought gone into it, of ambition, of kind of just the money that's gone into it, you can see it on screen. You can see that they've not cut corners. If any of these other shows have that, then that's in a really good place, and that makes the MCU going forward much more interesting, because some characters they're doing TV series haven't had films and aren't known entities that will feed it, because these are all part of the same universe. And what we all already thought was a giant universe of the MCU is expanding kind of exponentially now, both in terms of new films and new characters, existing characters who are coming back, now these TV series where they can have a bit more long-form storytelling for an individual character, really build those character developments. It's a really exciting time, I think.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that in the next Doctor Strange film, Multiverse of Madness, which is a great title for a film, Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff will be appearing in that, and it's rumoured I think she might be the antagonist of that film, so that it'll be maybe the tail end of this series will kind of lead us towards that, really. But I just want to make a shout out to Jack Schaefer, who's the showrunner of this show, and she was the screenwriter for Captain Marvel and the upcoming Black Widow as well, so that kind of tissue of the cinematic universe and television universe there. Catherine Hahn's performance of Agnes is brilliant. She's just bonkers and unhinged. And I really love, because I was a fan of that 70s show when it came on Netflix. What show's that? Hey, particularly Deborah Jo Rupp, who plays Mrs. Hart, who is the wife of the boss of Paul Bettany's character.
Yeah.
So to see those kind of trademarks there, it's very clever, because straight away, she'd previously been in a sitcom that was set in a particular period in history. So it suddenly took me back into that period, really. It also reminds me of the film Pleasantville. I don't know if any of you have ever watched that in 1998. If you haven't, do watch it. It's about a group of teens who are transported from the modern day into a black and white sitcom world, and they're slowly bringing colour to the world, and it's absolutely incredible. But I've heard that WandaVision is going to be doing a different sitcom era each week. So that apparently
that is true to a certain point. Apparently.
It's going to be like The Office, aren't they? Going to be drawing for The Office in one episode? That's what I've heard.
Apparently, it is going to continue to go to stretch decade by decade up to a point, and then it's going to stop.
Yeah.
So for me, that's going to be the crunch point. It's like I'm really enjoying this development of the style and the form, but it's all about that handbrake turn. It's all about that gear change. Really, it's the boy's own key change, stepping up off the stools moment of how they get from point A to point B. That's going to be the real masterpiece of the form. Like if they can, it's always like the great thing about this show is that it's demonstrating that superheroes can be more than battling the big bad and saving the world and defeating 100,000 aliens. Like they're characters, they're human, they're real, they're
people.
it's
not just big beams up into the sky.
Exactly. So the interesting thing for me is how they're going to essentially square that circle, like how they're eventually going to bring Wanda and Vision back into that world that they're currently apart from, which is going to be a testament of the show as a whole.
I was wondering, could you imagine if WandaVision was set in the UK and it was UK sitcoms?
Oh God.
Can you imagine that?
Some mothers do have them, and
The Good Life,
or Only Fools and Horses.
Yeah,
just in a tower block.
Yeah. Are you being served? I mean, I'd be up for that. Just to be clear,
That'd be incredible.
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
Hello, hello.
Ah.
Well, I've had a bit of a week. I tell you, a bit of a week. My number one thing I never like to engage with in conversation is what, everyone? What's the one thing that, if you came up to me at a party, right, and started engaging me in conversation about what subject, what would you've all known me, Kris known me the longest, but you've all known me enough. What's the one thing where I'd be like, I'm really not, I'm too polite to say, please stop talking. But what's the one subject where I'm just like, I have no interest in this subject whatsoever?
Jigsaws.
Well, that's made Kris's editing job a bit more difficult.
A subject for me.
WandaVision, I don't know. Let's just do the whole hog now.
Yeah.
Schotten Totten too.
A subject that you don't want to talk about at a party.
I was round at my neighbour's house, and this is pre the times, and there was a guy there, and he started, and for whatever reason, he thought that I would be interested in talking about the subject, so he started telling me about all of the things that he loved about these things, and I had no interest whatsoever, but he just kept on talking, and I was too polite to say, I have no interest in talking about these things. Can we talk about something else, maybe?
Cars. It's got to be cars, Sam, hasn't it?
Bicycles.
I want to hear bicycles.
Yeah,
actually, cars is a good shape.
Kris is correct. Cars is just...
But you drive a car, Sam.
Yeah, I know, but I don't need to know about why the Audi A4's 2.8 litre engine delivers more torque per second than the Audi.
Are you not interested in that?
I could not. A car for me gets me from A to B economically, cheaply, and at a reasonable speed, but never exceeding the national speed limit.
Yeah.
So when my car broke the other day, I was like, this is sending me down a horrible, painful series of conversations with people about things that I don't understand.
Tell us how your car broke, Sam.
So my car developed a very unique and interesting fault. My wife went out and she said, "Oh, the lights are on in the car." I was like, "Oh, that's weird. I must have forgotten to turn them off. Whatever."
Easily done.
Easily done. And so she got in, sort of started, and I could hear her starting up the car, turning it off, starting the car, turning it off. And I thought, "Oh, that's a bit weird." Maybe she's because lights have been on for a while. The minimal thing I know about cars is there's a battery, which is important for some reason. And so maybe she's letting the engine turn over to put a bit more energy back into the battery if the lights have been on for a while.
Yeah, sure.
And then she drove away. And I was like, that's weird. Especially considering she just said she was going to take our son out for a walk. And then about 30 seconds later, I heard this sound, right? And sorry, whilst I was making that sound, Zoom popped up with a thing saying, playing music, set up professional audio in audio settings.
Wow,
that's
what a great singer you are, says Zoom.
And the horn was blaring constantly from the car. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Luckily, on turning off the engine, the sound stopped. And I was like, oh my God, thank. That it obviously just must be a fault somewhere or something. So Lisa went on a walk with the dog and our son. And I thought, I'll fix this.
Oh dear.
So I turned the engine on, lights still on. And then I thought and then the horn was silent. So I thought, oh, right, I must have fixed it. But I'll just test it. So I lightly tapped the horn. And then it was just on permanently. And and you know that sense of panic where you're just like, oh no. Yeah. And I was just like, I just kept on tapping it like, please, just turn off. Just whatever happens, please, just turn off, because I don't know. I have no idea about how to fix these things. So the horn of my car, and this was about, what was the time? It was about 7:00 in the evening. And my horn was sitting on my driveway, blaring constantly. Yeah. And I was just like, when I'm not usually someone to panic, but you know how for some reason when there's a considerably loud noise, it makes it very, very difficult to just go, right, just breathe, calm, let's think through this problem rationally. Yeah. And to make the situation even worse, so the first thing I did was just I called my wife and just said, just keep walking. and she was like,
and if you get lost, just follow the sound.
Yeah, she was like, is that sound you? And I went, yeah. So then, luckily enough, the one thing I do know about is policies. So I've got a policy with our breakdown recovery provider that they can do home repairs. So called them out in the interim, tried to Google and solve the issue myself. But to cut a long story short, it was and I do apologise to everyone about this, because obviously we're going through a difficult time, but my horn was blaring. In the most obvious and blatant breaking of COVID protocols that I've seen since this started, both my neighbours on either side just converged towards me to help me out with this situation. And most of them were conversations of, you just need to take the fuse out. I was like, I have no idea that there were fuses or electrics involved. Yeah. And it's like, just uncouple the battery. And and it's like, have you not got any spanners? And
they may as well have been talking about flux capacitors and all that stuff. And
obviously at this point, the horn is blaring.
Oh, my word.
My neighbour, bless him, he's such a sweet man, but during the time the horn was blaring, he was explaining how loud the horn is and how dangerous it is to be exposed to that sound for any prolonged period of time. It's like, this is 110 decibels, don't you know? And I was like... But then, luckily, my parents-in-law were sort of subcontracted to provide immediate assistance, and they sent to me screenshots of the manual for our car, told me where the fuse was, pulled out the fuse, and silence, peace, joy. Disconnected the lights. The recovery guy did that. He restarted something called the ECM.
Who knows? Could be anything, couldn't it?
He could have told you anything.
Yeah, he could have told you anything.
So, the so-called bants with the recovery guy he was like, I've disconnected the lights, so if you ever need them, just stop the car, plug them back in. And to be honest, when do you use your horn anyway? Just run them over.
Sage counsel.
Yeah. So we're kind of 2 weeks on from that debacle. I now have a courtesy car.
Right.
So
the courtesy being the horn doesn't blare all day and all night.
Yeah.
So I assume, Sam, you've given your parents-in-law back the mug. So speaking of neighbours, I've been woken up the last week or so at 7 a.m. every morning by my neighbour shouting. And I couldn't understand why it was every morning. With metronomic regularity at 7 a.m. I couldn't quite understand.
What were they shouting?
Well,
was
that's
it,
the thing.
I don't want to get up?
Well, it was like it was about 2 or 3 days into it. I was thinking, I've got to try and work out what this is.
Yeah.
And it was, what they were shouting was, Alexa, snooze. So I could ascertain that A, they've got an Alexa for Christmas, and B, they were keeping it in their kitchen, not their bedroom. So the alarm would go off in the kitchen to wake them up. But for Alexa to hear them, to ask them to snooze it, they had to shout at the top of their lungs from the bedroom.
Brilliant.
That's
and I'm lucky I'm the morning person.
So good.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? You've got this technology for convenience, but you put it in the most inconvenient place.
I much prefer these smaller games where, quite often, because it gives you can play it in an afternoon. Or in the case of Frog Detective 2, the case of the Invisible Wizard, you can complete it in an hour. And so I played the original, which is called The Haunted Island, a Frog Detective game. Now I will admit they have padded the game out by about 20 minutes extra, so it's not as short as the first one. But it's come at exactly the right time. It is like as I've been saying, I'm in this mood of short games, but I'm also in this mood of games that are really pleasant, funny, and lovely, and kind of like basically threat free. Like no way of dying. Like I've been enjoying point and click adventures a lot recently, where there is no death state. It's just figure it out, or where failure is not particularly punished. I like games that do that.
Yeah, that's good.
And these two games are that. So they are, you play as a frog detective. I believe he is called Frog Detective, and he is sent on missions by a little penguin who calls him up on the phone, and his weird little house. He picks up the phone in his weird little house, and all he's got in his little house is a phone and his magnifying glass and a wall with some pictures of his friends on. And it's very, very cute. So I want to be very clear. This game could be for kids, for Fortnite kiddies, though they wouldn't play it. It could be for kids. Like, it is very, it's like very suitable for everyone, but it's definitely suitable for adults, because it is this very sweet, very flat colour, simple adventure story game where you are moving around this environment in first person as this frog, using the little magnifying glass whenever you want. You never need to use the magnifying glass in any puzzle ever, and you can always see plenty clearly enough. It's literally just a button where you can look at things in closer detail. It does nothing. It's great. Just fun little silly things like that. You have characters that you speak to who are quite strange, but always very pleasant to you. Like there's never any feeling of like real animosity or anything like that. There's little visual gags hidden throughout the entire of the hour-long experience. Little characters who'll be like peeking around a corner and then they'll like dash back in. You'll never see them again, and who knows what they were. And they're just silly little nice sort of moments that you just see every once in a while. And then you do these little quests for people to find out information. So in Frog Detective 2, the main thing is basically finding out who is the Invisible Wizard, and also who ruined the party. And throughout all of this, there is this kind of sense in which your brain is constantly thinking, when does it turn dark? When does it go bad? And it never does. It's just flat out lovely. The story, the actual writing itself is really well done, really simply presented. There's no voice acting or anything like that. It's just really straightforward, but very sparkling. Like the writing really, like, the voice of the frog. Like you know exactly how the different characters are going to talk to you. Like, you know how when someone's feeling sad through really well written dialogue. Like, it actually is. It's really well put together. And as I say, I just breezed through it in an hour as part of like an afternoon, and the satisfaction of getting to the end of that and just being like, what a lovely thing! It's the same satisfaction that I got, funnily enough, as reading like a graphic novel, a collected trade paperback graphic novel, where you sit down and you go, I'm going to read this for an hour, and then you go from front to back and you go, that was great, and you feel really satisfied at the end of it, of like, that was really lovely, it took me into a different headspace for a little while, and now I'm back, and now I've got the rest of my evening to go off and do whatever it is that I wanted to do.
Like, I'm currently starting to watch a video by H Bomber Guy about why Sherlock is garbage, and he explains why. And as in Sherlock, the BBC series. Yeah. And one of the things he talks about there in terms of his reasonings why and his arguments is that Sherlock, before the new version by Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, was that each of the stories was this self-contained narrative.
Yeah.
And you could jump in at any point and you know you're going to get a mystery from start to end, and that's exactly what it was going to be. So it was this satisfying and this wonderful like adventure experience, and the books were the same. And what they changed with the BBC version is to change it from that satisfying mystery deductive reasoning thing to have this whole like overarching like narrative involving Moriarty, and that like takes away from the actual like what Sherlock gives you as a character in terms of like these self-contained like complete stories, and like there is satisfaction and there is worth in that as a way of telling stories.
Completely. Like there's just this real sense in shorter form storytelling and shorter form games where you can explore an idea that would be very tiring over 15 hours. The thing I always go back to when I think about games is like the arcades, and so the reason that arcade ports, for example, tended not to do particularly well post PlayStation 1 era, where games were getting longer and more complex and more story focused. The reason that those arcade ports didn't really continue to keep the imagination of people is that like they're actually kind of one trick, right? Like if you're going to go and play Space Invaders, you don't really want to play Space Invaders for 50 hours in a row. It's so the same thing, right? Whereas when you go into an arcade and you put in a credit, you get the exact amount of time that the game designer thought you were going to get with Space Invaders. Like,
I think that's slightly different though, because that's like sunk cost fallacy, though, isn't it? Because with an arcade machine in a game, it's kind of, well, I've put this amount of money into it, so I'm going to get this out of it.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, like if you look at something like Time Crisis, right? Like that game takes 40 minutes to complete in the arcades, something like that. Time Crisis 2.
Yeah,
that is not a game that you would want to take to the same length of an Assassin's Creed, right? Like 80 hours of light gun shooter is not actually, and it sounds ludicrous when you say it out loud, right? But it's the same with other different forms of genres of games. Like there's plenty of point-and-click adventures that I've just been like, why would I want to do this for 25 hours? Whereas I look at something like, obviously I've talked about Siberia before, but like, you know, those games are about 5 hours long each. Perfect. And like Frog Detective is silly and cute and lovely, and for an hour, it absolutely does not outstay its welcome. It makes you, if anything, you get to the end of it and you're like, oh, I can't wait for the next one. And they tease the third one, by the way. Amazing. Like a James Bond.
Frog Detective will return.
It is exactly that. Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. And like, but you get to the end of it and you don't feel it's outstayed its welcome. You really feel like you've had a different experience and something that that you wouldn't get in something that was much more, you know, quote unquote, worthy. Like, you know, like a much bigger kind of a game. And the other cool thing about it is obviously these smaller games, especially this one, they're cheap. Like, they're like, I think of them as like sweets. You buy a couple and you scoff them down and it's great. Like,
well, it's less than a pint, isn't it? Both.
Right. Right, like
both these games on Steam.
And Pete, two things. Firstly, can I ask what you playing this on?
So I'm playing this on PC. And you do not need a decent rig. You don't need a decent rig so much to the point that when you boot up a Unity engine game, I don't know if you've ever had this, and it will give you different graphics settings that you can have, like low, good, best, all this sort of stuff. They just renamed all of the graphics settings to like really cute things, like just like super over the top names. Like they know, like because it's so like flat in terms of color and quite simple in terms of geometry. It's not really that much saving you're ever going to get. If you can run any Unity game, you can probably run this. And again, like for an hour, it's fine for a laptop, right? Your laptop's not going to suddenly turn into the center of the sun because you've been playing it for 3 hours.
No. That was Staying In with Daniel Frost, Sam Turner, Peter Willington and myself, Kris Darby. Huge thanks to Coiled Spring Games for kindly sending us a copy of Schotten Totten 2, a game that is just as enjoyable to play as it is to say. That will be a welcome addition to our Board Game Geek profile. Just some housekeeping. Our entire back catalogue of episodes is available from your usual podcast provider. If you're stuck as to where to listen to us, then visit stayinginpodcast.com, which will direct you to all the different places you can catch us, including Spotify, Stitcher, and YouTube. If you want to ask us anything, as long as it's not car-related, stayinginpodcast@gmail.com is how to do it. Or alternatively, reach out to us via social media @stayinginpod, has you covered there. You'll be pleased to know that since completing the recording, I've finally finished my Moon jigsaw. It was worth it, although I'm happy for it to be another few years or so before I tackle another one of these things. Bye-bye.